out of here too quickly. So with that, I am going to call our Tuesday, April 18th Common Council meeting to order. We have a couple of special additions for this evening, and the first is to introduce our new and our re-elected officials. We are going to call each person up one by one and have them take their oath, and then you can take your seats. And if you'd like to bring anybody up with you, you're more than welcome to. So let's call up our returning alderperson from District 1, Dana Davis.
I, Dana Davis, who have been elected alderperson for the first district, for the city of Watertown, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of this office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Yeah, you can just stay up here. Why don't you just come up and I'll keep calling people up. All right. For District 3, we did have a person from the community who won that election, Robert Smale. Mr. Smale has recently sent in a resignation of this office. So I will be putting on our next council agenda a discussion and action item for us to decide how we'd like to fill that seat. So a little surprising turn of events in the last couple of days, but we will have a discussion on that at our next agenda item, or our next council meeting. So with that, our next alderperson to take their oath is Mr. Brad Blinky. That's fine. And if you want to stand close to that microphone.
You cannot stand that far away.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I'll go this way.
All right, have you raise your right hand? Repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Brad Blanky,
who have been elected alderperson for the 5th District
for the 5th District
for the city of Watertown,
for the city of Watertown,
swear that I will support
the
Constitution of the United States
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully
and
and impartially discharge the duties of this office
to
the best of my ability,
so help me God.
Our next alderperson is our returning alder from District 7, Mr. Eric Schmid.
Have you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Eric Schmid,
who have been elected alderperson for the 7th District
alderperson for the 7th District
for the city of Watertown,
for the city of Watertown,
swear that I will support
the
Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of this office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
And then our next alderperson representing District 9 is Mr. Myron Moldenhauer.
I'll have you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Myron Moldenhauer,
who have been elected alderperson of the 9th District
of the 9th District
for the city of Watertown,
for the city of Watertown,
swear that I will support
the
Constitution of the United States
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully
and impartially
discharge the duties of this office to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
And thank you to our clerk, who I always politely ask if she's willing to do the oath that many times. So thank you, Megan. I'm going to give Jordan a chance to, and I shut off this mic up here. So we should be okay. You want to shut that one off yet? So as we get settled here, I just want to point out to our new alders in front of you is a binder that'll take a little bit of time to get through. That's an orientation binder that we put together in the last couple of years. There's a jump drive in there so that you have live links, and then a couple of other kind of informational pieces that will help you get kind of orientated to how we do business. So with that, I'm going to ask the clerk to please take the roll.
Davis. Here. Lampy. Bartz.
Here.
Blanky.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Schmid.
Here.
Wetzel. Moldenhauer.
Here.
And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Another special item for this evening is the election of our Common Council President. Typically, the way we've done it in the city of Watertown is that we take nominations. So we do not, we typically do take a nomination and a second. However, it's not required. It's just generally what we've done. So in a moment, I will open the floor for nominations. Again, if you'd like a second, we can do so, but it is certainly not required. And then I will take 3 calls for the closure of nominations. So with that, I will open the floor to nominations for the Common Council President. Mr. Bartz.
Jonathan Lampy.
Okay. There's a motion for Lampy.
I nominate Alderman Fred Smith.
Nomination for Smith. Any others? I'm going to call any other nominations for a second time. Otherwise, we have a nomination for Lampy and a nomination for Smith. Mr. Wetzel?
I'll nominate Eric Schmid.
We have a nomination for Schmid. Any further nominations? I'm going to call one more time for nominations. Any others? Okay, so we will close nominations. The clerk has provided each of you a piece of paper and a pen. This is one of the rare things we do to vote in this manner, perhaps the only one that I've experienced. So in order to, before you put your pen to paper, in order for someone to win the position, 5 votes are required for that person. So we have to have a majority of the council, not the majority of those present, to win. If no candidate receives 5 votes, the top 2 vote getters, since we have 3 in this case, will be resubmitted for a second vote. So everyone clear on that? Requires 5 to win. If we have, since we have 3, the top 2, should no one get 5 votes, the top 2 will then advance to like a sectional, if you will, in the sports world, for another vote. So with that, I would ask for you to please cast your vote. You can fold those up, and the clerk will collect those if you just want to place them on the blue countertop. Do I announce? Or does the clerk need to announce?
Alder Smith has 6 votes.
What you just passed me was different.
Carshani has 5 votes.
Okay, so that's the 5 votes that we need. So we have a new Common Council president. Congratulations, Mr. Smith. We might have to adjust your. There we go. Got it back up here, okay? All right. Okay, our next item is another kind of special organizational meeting item, and that is the election of our Plan Commission member. Again, same procedure applies here. We would seek nominations in just a moment. I'll again call for three calls for the closure of those nominations. If we only have one person that's nominated, we'll just do a voice vote. If not, we will take a roll. So at this time, I'll open nominations for the Plan Commission. Mr. Smith?
Nominate Alderperson Blanky.
Okay, we have Blanky. Any other nominations? Second time on nominations? And third time on nominations? Okay, we will close nominations. Being as though we only have one, we'll take a voice vote on this one. So all those in favor of Mr. Blanky being the Plan Commission member, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Very good. Congratulations, Mr. Blanky. Pencil in the second and fourth Monday of the month at 4:30. We meet right here in this room. All right. Thank you guys for working through us on those organizational items. With that, we will hop back to our usually scheduled programming, which is our first item is the minutes of the council meeting from April 3rd. Anyone have any questions on any of those minutes? All right. Our next item is comments and suggestions from citizens present. I believe we have one registered commenter this evening.
Joe Callis.
And Joe, if you would please come to the microphone by Alderperson Davis and state your name and your address.
Hi, everybody. My name's Joe Callis, and I live at 1217 Douglas Avenue. So Mayor McFarland, the council, everybody else. It's good to be able to address you tonight. I did run for the council, and I met a lot of people who brought up to me the new fire station. And I guess I hadn't at that point given it a lot of thought, but a lot of people are concerned that it's very, very expensive, and couldn't there have been a better solution for the space needs? We all agree that the fire department needs more space. There is no question about that. So we have a problem, and it's a space problem, and how we solve that problem is building a new, huge fire station all under one roof. And to me, it just seems wasteful to abandon the existing fire station, which even the 5 Bugle study concluded was serving this community very well. And the response time from there is almost identical to the response time from a new fire station. So that all being equal, it seems to me that it's reckless to abandon that. I know the word is you're going to park squad cars in there, which is at least you're using it. But all the money that was put into that building over the years just seems now to be tossed to the side. And I really wish that with the new council here, that maybe you could revisit that. I know it's like the train has already left the station, so there's nothing we can do. But there is something we can do because nobody has broken ground yet, and there can still be a satellite station, perhaps where you bought the land somewhere else, and this would work very well to suit the needs of the Watertown community, in my opinion. The other thing that people asked me, they really wanted a satellite space. They wanted a satellite fire station. But the other thing was, they asked me, why was this not put out to a referendum to let the people weigh in on it, since it's such a major capital expense? And of course, I had no answer for that, and I'm sure you know, but I'm not privy to that. And I think that would have been a very appropriate way to go. I know it's probably too late now, obviously, because everything's in motion. But for future reference, I would think that would be a good policy to adopt to get the pulse of the people. You know, we're in really tough times here. Inflation is sky high. Groceries are, you know, out of sight. Everything, and people are really strapped. And property taxes for retired people, I have to say, you know, when you're on a fixed income, it's hard to plan ahead when property taxes keep going up. And this will affect our property taxes in some way, shape, or form. Who knows how much until it happens. So those are my comments. I hope you would, you know, at least hear them and maybe revisit this. This is a long-term thing. This isn't something that just comes and goes. It's a one-time deal. Many other communities do have satellite fire stations, and they work very well. So that's my suggestion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callis. And Mr. Callis, either I can follow up with you or Alderperson Davis can. All the items that you mentioned, we do have reasons and answers for. So we can chat after Alderperson Davis, and one of us can follow up. It looks like, do we have anyone else for public comment? Or anyone else that would like to comment online? All right. We do have another opportunity at the end of our meeting for public comment as well. Next on your agenda is reports. You have the Plan Commission minutes from February 27th, site plan from February 27th, licensing from March 8th, site plan from March 13th, finance from March 13th, site plan from March 27th, public safety and welfare from April 5th, and site plan from April 10th. Any comments or questions on any of those minutes? All right. Then let's move on to communications and recommendations. It was at the suggestion of Alderperson Bartz, and I think it's a fantastic suggestion, that at our meeting that we have a moment of silence for Mayor David. I don't know that many realize our agenda is dictated by ordinance. Our ordinance literally lays out the sequence. So this, while I would have loved to have this at the front end of the meeting, this is the most appropriate place for that. So as you all know, Mayor David had his funeral just last week, and he was just a tremendous asset to this community, serving as mayor not once but twice, and on the Common Council for many years as well. So what he has given to the city, few will be able to compare to. So in honor of all he's given, I would just encourage you all to take a moment of silence for Mayor John David. All right, thank you. Something that Mayor David would have loved is an opportunity to recognize our amazing city team we have here. And so employee recognitions is our next item. We have two for you all this evening. One is Lynn Utek for 5 years at the library, and another we have with us this evening. And so I'll invite up our Public Works Director, Jane Ellen Holloway, and Wanda Frederick from engineering. Wanda is celebrating 5 years here at the city, so I'll invite you both to come on up. If you'd like to come to this microphone right here. And Wanda, you can come up right next to Jane Ellen.
So from the first interview for the part-time position of clerk typist, Wanda has been a gift. 5 years ago, engineering and building safety and zoning needed additional administrative assistance. We advertised the position and we received several applications. We interviewed several candidates, but none of them had the credentials or displayed signs of being a good fit for our two divisions. Then literally in the 11th hour, we received an application from a Wanda Frederick. We interviewed Wanda Frederick, and it was during that interview that it became very clear that You not only fit the credentials, but you would be a great fit in our 2 divisions. Over the past 5 years, Wanda has grown in the position so well that a little over a year ago, she was promoted to administrative assistant in the engineering division. Wanda is the front line of communication and the first person the public, vendors, elected officials, city team members, contractors, developers, and business folks see when they enter the engineering division. Wanda handles much for the division, as well as assisting building safety and zoning as needed. There isn't anything that Wanda wouldn't do for engineering and building safety and zoning. She is well liked and respected by fellow team members, leadership team, the public, the mayor, and other elected officials. Wanda, from day one, is and remains a gift to engineering, building safety and zoning, and the city. We're grateful to have her on our team. Congratulations, Wanda, for
excited.
5 years of service, and cheers to 5 more.
Oh, bravo. That was wonderful. Oh, you should take a photo. Yep, for Jordan. Very good. Well, Jane Ellen said that Wanda would do anything for those divisions. It's accurate, but she'd also do anything for the city. And I know that because there's days where I run down there, literally, if you see me, and I whisk that door open, and she's like, "What can I do for you, Mayor?" And I think she would do that for anybody. So I completely echo the comments Jane Ellen made, and I just think we're so fortunate to have people who are just willing to serve this community and to give of their time in that manner. Because it's not always the easiest job to be that first person answering the angry people that sometimes come into City Hall. So thank you, Wanda. All right, equally as exciting. Actually, no, this one is. These are some of our annual reports for this year. The first is the 2022 Tourism Annual Report Financial. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Something told me you were going to have some comments.
Sure. For the folks who are brand new here, I just got off of the Tourism Commission, so have a little bit of context on this one. The financials, as you see them here, are essentially, the financials for tourism are essentially entirely based on room tax, which is still substantially down, especially for the Watertown area post-COVID. And so the numbers that you see reflected here represent a deficit about normal operating of about $20,000 year over year. And what this essentially represents is that to account for that, the amount of granting that tourism has been able to do to events that attract people to the town has been dropped by about that amount to make sure that the budget continues to balance. There are some factors that are working in its favor. This is a number that's getting better year over year. But essentially, we are at a major disadvantage in terms of tourism because we spend money essentially to attract people to this area. And then the room tax gets paid in Johnson Creek, Jefferson, Fort Atkinson, Oconomowoc, and every place else where the rooms are after we sell out our allocation here. So we have a very hard time essentially collecting the room tax that tourism generates. And I'm not expecting that essentially structural piece to change until we have some more hotel rooms collecting more room tax.
Thank you for that insight. Any other questions on this one? Any comments? All right, the next item in your packets is the Department of Public Health 2022 Annual Report. I see Ms. Quest is here with us this evening, if anyone has any questions or comments on this one. All right, seeing none, let's continue. Our next item is the Fire Department March Monthly Report. Questions or comments for the chief on this one? All right. All right, let's go to new business then. Our only new business item is the committee assignments. And I just want to mention beforehand, given Mr. Smale's refusal to take his oath, he would just be removed from these assignments. So we don't have to take a motion to remove him from the list. We could accept the list with him on it, and he just would not obviously receive those appointments. So with that, is there a motion on these? Yep.
I move the list of appointments that was presented to us.
Motion by Mr. Lampe.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Questions, comments? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Very good, thank you. All right, let's go to miscellaneous business. You have the payroll summary from March 22nd to April 4th and cash and investment summary ending March 31st. Comments or questions on that one? Oh. sure do. Let's back up the train. Item 13 is the accounts payable. Without Mr. Remline, I'm not used to, Mr. Moldenhauer, there is this long, there we go. All right.
I was gonna jump in.
Happy to see it. Motion by Mr. Moldenhauer, second by Mr. Wetzel. Any discussion on the accounts payable? Megan?
Moldenhauer. Davis. Lampy. Bartz. Blanky.
Aye.
Smith. Schmid. Wetzel. Motion passed 8-0.
Very good. All right, now we're on miscellaneous business. Same two items there in your packets, the payroll summary and cash investments. Questions or comments on either of those?
I have a question about
Sure.
the payroll summary. It's always interesting, of course, to look at the overtime. It looks like the overtime for the fire department may be decreasing. When did we hire those 3 new firefighters? Are they all 3 hired?
They are not on duty yet.
Oh,
We were short. Without those-
Chief, could you grab a microphone? I see that one will need to get turned on.
The 3 additional firefighters have not been hired yet. But we have hired other ones to fill other vacancies that we had, and we had two people off for extended sick time for injuries last year that drove overtime month after month.
okay. Because it's running ahead, I would say, it's pretty high, but this past month seemed like maybe it stabilized a little bit. No.
Any other comments or questions on either of these? All right, let's go to licenses. The first item in your packet is the licensing board memo to the council. And the second item pertains to that memo. The first being review and take action on an application for a temporary Class B license for the Town Square grand opening by the Watertown Rotary Club on May 20th. Is there a motion on this one?
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Bartz,
Second?
second by Mr. Blinky. Any questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Our next is an action item for a temporary Class B license for Watertown Riverfest on August 10th to August 13th. Is there a motion on this one?
Before we go there, I just want to say I'm going to abstain from this one, since my name's on it.
Very good. Mr. Smith?
A motion that we approve the Class B license for Watertown Riverfest.
Motion by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Bartz. Questions, comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And anybody abstain? Very good. And our last is to take action on a temporary premise amendment with an application from Aaron Schrader from Run and Aaron's for the dates listed there in May, June, July, and August from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Motion by Mr. Lampy, second by Mr. Smith. Discussion on this one?
I just have one
Yeah.
question. The only thing missing would be a time frame that the temporary fence is going to be up. When is it going to be put up, and when is it to be taken down by?
Anyone? I mean, I don't know when it's going up, but it has to be up until the event ends at 10 p.m.
Under the terms of the temporary license, they would have to have the fence in place during the event. There's no set time for them to have it
Up before.
up by or removed by, other than the fence has to be up from 6 to 10.
Okay. So when it says temporary fence, it could literally be one that rolls out
It is.
simply for that time?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, good questions. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, very good. Let's go to ordinances. The first is ordinance 23-09. This is an ordinance to create Article 13 of Chapter 24. This is for the Town Square Programming Commission in the City Code. This is here for me in Park, Rec, and Forestry on the first reading.
I move for adoption of ordinance 23-09.
Motion by Mr. Bartz, second by Mr. Lampy. Questions or comments on this one? Mr. Schmidt.
Reading it after the initial appointments, what statutory authority are they going to have once they are reelected then or appointed by you after that first year?
What authority will they have? They're an advisory committee.
So just an advisory?
Mm-hmm. Correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. We just, to get the square off, the intention here was to, to get the square off the ground, there's a lot of potential. There is a lot of donated money, And so we wanted not only just our city staff to weigh in on how that money is spent and how the square is programmed, but to have more of a diverse representative committee to advise them on the programming plans and the spending of those donations. So that was the intent of it. In my mind at least, similar to the branding committee, we created a branding committee to launch the brand. We sunsetted that committee after I'm going to say 6 years or so. I'm not sure how long this committee, will need to last into the future, but I think in these first few years at least, it'll be good to have some advisory capacity to our city team that's responsible as stewards of those donated dollars. Mr. Smith?
Yes, I'm going to make a motion to postpone this ordinance. It kind of comes as a package with two of the resolutions, 9505 and 9506. Taken together, it is a very complex and very important consideration that we will be making as it relates to each of them. The motion that I'm going to make is a debatable motion and will have to be made again at the time of the other resolutions. So I will make the motion now, and then we would all have an opportunity to discuss the motion. So I would like to make a motion to postpone this ordinance's consideration until our next council meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Moldenhauer. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Mr. Lampe?
If this one in your mind is dependent on the resolutions, which we are going to pass tonight, I mean, are you open to just basically tabling it till after we pass the resolutions? Is this just an ordering thing in your mind?
I am going to make the same motion for each of those other two resolutions, that they be postponed. Actually, this is more straightforward, but so that we could consider them all together as a package, I'm making the motion now, and we'll make it again for the two resolutions relating to the town square. The reason why I'm doing this is the first time I saw these three proposed enactments was after the council packet went out on Friday. There are a number of considerations that I want to try to do some more research on, relating specifically to the RDA, the source of the funding, issues that are particularly relevant to the two resolutions. I am eager to try to be open-minded on these, but I feel that, number one, we have three new council members who probably haven't had much opportunity to look at these. I have done my best to be up to speed on them, but there are some things that I would like to do which will entail some additional personal homework on my part, and I feel like postponing ultimately the three, but initially this one, to our next meeting would be a wise thing to do.
Mr. Lampe?
In terms of visibility, I saw this agreement come through finance at a previous meeting, so available in the finance packet, I think at least a week ago. RDA previously, and also probably the Park and Rec. So I think this has been out for review and discussion at the committee level before coming to council.
What I just would like to offer, I can't obviously debate, but for factual informational purposes, we have an event coming up in about a month, and we cannot contractually obligate the city to money we don't have. So I cannot sign a contract for a band, as an example, or a balloon twister, or anything else, until, I mean, we don't need the commission in order to do that, but we will need the establishment of a future fund and those donation accounts being allocated. So for situational awareness, I think it's important to have that awareness that we will be in a difficult spot if I wait 2 weeks to secure entertainment. It will be, we've already lost entertainment, honestly. I was just informed of that today, that we lost a band for the opening because we haven't been able to obligate our city funds to it. So I also just, again, contextually, so this one's creating a commission. The other two items, 9505 is the agreement at which the city is accepting the town square. And 9506 is the acceptance of several $100,000 and putting those into a budget managed by the finance director. And then the capacity to expend money according to that budget. So just to kind of level up what these documents are. Mr. Lampy.
I guess just for clarification, I mean, I know the minutes may not necessarily be in here. I mean, was there any objection at any of those three committees or any no votes?
Did you have any objection at Park and Rec? No, and we didn't have any at Finance. Mr.
Mayor
Moldenhauer.
McFarland, I'd like to have some time to study this myself, to really look into it.
I will be looking for your guidance on what funds I can use to secure entertainment for the town square. I refuse to allow that event to not function appropriately. And I can't do that without money. Ms. Davis.
And this is just the first reading,
I
so
know.
there's a second reading, so there would be a potential of something in your homework that you find is concerning, that could come up again at the second reading.
Mr. Blanky.
We also have the option to suspend the rules and pass the ordinance in one meeting, 2 readings on one meeting, should that happen. So if we do have an instance where we need to get that done in 2 weeks, we can do it then. Postponing it by 2 weeks with the possibility of that option is there.
So right now we have a motion to postpone ordinance 22-09 into our next meeting, which is May 2nd. Any other discussion on just that motion? You have anything?
Do we have to do anything on the first motion made?
Okay, so we will take, I'll ask the clerk to take the roll on the motion to postpone the creation of the Town Square Programming Commission, 22-09, to our next meeting.
Smith?
Aye.
Schmid? Wetzel?
No.
Moldenhauer?
Aye.
Davis? No. Lampy?
No.
Bartz?
No.
Blanky?
Aye.
So motion failed, 3-4.
No.
Eight
One.
people
Oh, I'm sorry,
voted.
Smith?
It's tied 4-4, which means I vote, and I vote no. So that motion fails, correct? All right, so we're back at the original motion, which is to approve ordinance 22-09. Additional discussion on that? Mr. Smith?
Yes, I do. I have discussion on that. From a broad perspective, I'm concerned about what I consider to be generally the proliferation of government entities, the continuing expansion of government boards and commissions, and in this particular instance, I think it's important to come to a conclusion, a determination in each one of our minds as to what the town square is. I believe it is an appropriate enhancement and part of our park system. It is one of the community, one of the parks for our community, and appropriately falls under the oversight of an already existing commission, the Park, Rec, and Forestry Commission, just like every other individual park is under the oversight of that existing commission, a broad-based representative commission that is dedicated to the excellence of our park system. Now, in this instance, there's quite a bit of language here about how we're going to staff this new commission, the vast majority of whom are individuals that are already involved in government at one level or another. And what really strikes me as redundant, considering what I feel is the appropriate and preeminent position of the Park and Rec Commission, are the duties assigned on page 2 to this commission. And I'd like to read them to you because it becomes extremely clear that each of what this new commission is being tasked to do is something that is already being done by the Park and Rec Commission in relationship to other parks in our system. To solicit community input regarding programs the community would be interested in seeing being held at the new town square. That is something that is underway in relationship to a number of the parks that are already in our system, and there is nothing about the Park and Rec Commission's hesitancy to fulfill that as it relates to our new town square. B, provide guidance to the programming events coordinator regarding types of entertainment bookings and event programming for the city is interested in seeing held. So in other words, providing guidance, which is certainly within the purview of what the Park and Rec Commission would do, but for this new commission. C, the commission shall exercise broad responsibility for the maintenance improvement of the town square to better serve the city. That is part of the mandate and is extremely well fulfilled by the Park and Rec Commission within the scope of their responsibilities for all of our parks, and they would be even more capable of doing things such as this if it were not for the fact that there are limited funds. And they do extraordinarily well within the scope of the funding they're provided. D, the commission is authorized to create and appoint advisory groups to make studies and disseminate information on all of its activities. That is something the Park and Rec Commission could do right now. And in regard to past interests in unique areas of park availability, there have been efforts to try to do that, especially within our larger parks. And last, the commission will transmit to the Common Council a report annually highlighting the activities and so forth. The Park and Rec Commission provides an outstanding annual report for all of their activities. This could easily be included within their already existing annual report. So I see this as an unnecessary additional layer of government, and it is something that I think will usurp to some extent the clear-cut responsibility of our already existing Park and Rec Commission, which I feel is doing a very good job.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other comments or questions on this one? Mr. Lampe?
Long-term, I could understand your point of view. When we have a town square that's well-established, when we completely understand what that entertainment programming is, how the funding is moving through, and to what extent that is supposed to be providing an ongoing entertainment service, an economic development service, or other things. The point of the commission as it is defined here, as I understand it, is basically to bring in some of the extra expertise that would be new to Parks Department, essentially really to any Parks Department, especially around how to book entertainment. What are those things that are going to attract more foot traffic to the downtown, which was one of the stated goals, first of all, of putting the town square into place, and then also in terms of making sure that we have the programming and staffing behind it. So this is definitely a specialized commission with experts from essentially the major groups that are already doing event planning within the city, putting them together with entertainment specialists and understanding how do we launch this new function. The other thing that I want to point out is that this particular council did remove a staffer that was essentially going to be used in this capacity to gather up this information. And so to get what we essentially put together as a part-time, full-time position to perform this type of activity, it is my belief that we essentially need to arm them with as much of this supporting cast as they possibly can to get this off the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Lampe. Any other comments on this one? Ms. Davis?
I would just add that as you look at the membership, each of those different groups have an interest in the success of the town square, from the Main Street programs and to Redevelopment Authority that has invested so much time and work into it. So both the expertise that they bring, but also they have interest in the success of the town square, and it would be wise to hear in their input, but also to involve them in the process. It's actually different than our other park systems. What's going to be happening there is different. And as we're getting up and going, to me it's very similar in some ways to the Main Street Reconstruction Task Force that brings in all sorts of different people that are interested in the success of that and getting them talking and getting a strategic plan together. So I see it as a wise way forward. Again, not something that necessarily has to stay forever, but just to get it off the ground, it seems wise.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Schmidt?
I have concerns, much like Alderman Smith, in regards to the expansion of commissions and government sizing. But all these commissions could already have been coordinating to some degree already, sharing expertise, sharing their knowledge of how to do these things, and already had a plan in place tentatively to move forward. I understand it doesn't give them statutory authority to make fiscal decisions or enter into agreements or contracts. It still falls to the mayor and full-time staff of the city to do so. But to add another layer to simply event planning, coordination, and development, I don't see the long-term benefit or the short-term benefit. Because if it was truly that significant of a need, it would have been better served collectively to look at this a year or two ago when we had the city park, what we were going for, so we could look at it then, not now we need this to pass immediately because we're less than 60 days out till opening, and now we're scrambling to get something done. So.
Yeah, so I'll just provide, again, factual context. So the person that would have done that's me. This isn't, you know that. This isn't what I do every day, all day long.
Yeah.
So the person that would have brought that, we didn't have a park and rec director for a period of time. So I want to be clear, this one isn't the scramble by any means. The finance one is the one that's important. And I can speak on why that one is important from a factual perspective. But I just want awareness, like this wasn't a hurry up on this one. In my opinion, I asked Christine to wait till we kind of could sequence, to Mr. Smith's earlier point, kind of sequence everything together. Anybody else on this one? Mr. Lampe?
I just wanted to note that this is in some ways a successor commission. Originally, there was essentially an RDA body of essentially the same people who are looking at programming more informally put together, but this essentially ties them to, now that we are actually receiving this amount of money, how do we govern this? How do we make sure that we're best using it? So this isn't something that was necessarily created out of thin air just for this purpose. This is something that has been considered and was essentially tried in fits and starts during COVID, I would say. But basically, the nexus of this idea of having this advisory that was essentially oriented around the process of getting this park moving and getting the right entertainment in there and getting people to the downtown, basically maximizing this multi-million-dollar investment that's been put here, has been around for a while.
Thank you. Mr. Blanky?
I just have 2 points. One, I keep hearing that we're doing this to get it off the ground, but I don't see any mention of a sunset date in this ordinance. Once passed, this is permanent until we repeal. So without a sunset date, saying we're using this to get this off the ground, I don't think is necessarily accurate. The other point, and this goes to what Alderman Schmidt and Smith had pointed out, that we already have a Park and Rec committee that can do this. What's to stop us from getting the interested parties that could help with this involved in those Park and Rec meetings where it will pertain to the events in Town Square?
Anybody else on this one? Mr. Bartz?
I'm on the RDA, and we've talked about Town Square programming for a long time already, but I kind of look at this, the rationale behind this is similar to what we went through with Riverfest. I mean, there again, you have a committee that's organized and it operates out of a town park. Now, you could argue the Park and Rec department could run that as well, but it's much bigger and it's much more important to the city, the success of that, that we've taken steps to put in place a committee there to make sure that it does operate correctly, normally, as we want it to, for the success of the city. So we're looking at the Town Square Programming Commission much the same way. So this is just an advisory body. There are people from, yes, some are elected positions that are on there, an alderperson, but everyone else is from committees, Main Street Program, Redevelopment Authority, Tourism Commission. But the importance here is we're pulling together people that have somewhat of a vested interest in seeing the success of this. So, again, it's been something that's been discussed in the RDA world for a while. The RDA pushed very hard for a Town Square programmer through the last budget cycle. You guys are aware of that. But again, I think the Town Square Programming Commission is going to be important down the road to make sure the success for the Town Square happens for the city. So.
Before I ask for any other comment, just to factually piggyback there, I believe it was the RDA, and you can correct me, Mr. Bartz, but the RDA's way to satisfy the concern and request from the large donors that we have focused support and workforce around ensuring this square launches successfully. So I know when donations were coming in, people wanted to make sure that we had a lot of weight prepared to push this, space forward and to make sure it was an economic development success and a tourism success. So I believe that the RDA wanted to see something like this created so that we could, satisfy those concerns from some of the large supporters of this space as well. Okay. Anybody else on this one? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I just would make a comment that the information that you just presented in the discussion relating to this ordinance is something that is outside the scope of the discussion for which this ordinance is drawing comments. And certainly the RDA is going to become a topic of discussion soon enough, but to put additional information before us that is neither in dispute, nor is it something we have before us, is to bring extraneous information before us which we don't have the opportunity to respond. And that typically is what happens when information comes from the chair that is meant to be neutral.
I'm sharing factual information, which I'm allowed to do.
There hasn't been one mention relating to the RDA and about donors to the RDA
Mr.
and
Bartz
things of that type.
Mr.
That
Bartz
is a
just commented on the
financial
RDA.
consideration. What I'm saying is that these gratuitous comments from the chair that is required to be neutral is inappropriate in the midst of discussion by council members.
Would anyone else like to comment? Mr. Lampy?
I think this is more a question, again, for RDA background, because I don't necessarily have it. Was there an expectation that this commission remain in effect for a particular period of time?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, if it helps to drop some sort of a sunset date on the commission, and it sounds like that there is some consensus here that this is a commission that we do want to fold into permanent city government at some point. And like I said, I am open to that down the road. I am not open to that right now because, again, brand new expertise. But if you want to look at like a 3-year sunset, I would be okay with that. Let's give it 3 years, give it a good old bang, and by that time, staff, programming, and whatnot should be in place.
Anyone else that would like to comment?
With this ordinance, we have the luxury of being able to craft appropriate amendments over the next 2 weeks. We don't have that luxury with the 2 coming resolutions, and I'll try to deal with that when that time comes. But it's interesting that Alderman Bartz, and accurately so, based on this ordinance, referred to this commission as an advisory commission. And I think that's probably its intent. But if you want to see how this package of 3 different potential enactments brings that into question, is look at Resolution 9505 and the city's obligations. At the bottom of page 1, the middle of that third to the last sentence says, talking about this full-time staff person that's going to be hired, this full-time staff person shall report to, in other words, a direct report relationship, will report to the recreation and park director, what? As well as an independent committee that will oversee the programming and activities, referring to this commission. In other words, it is not only a divisive relationship in who this new employee is going to report to, but it takes this commission out of the appropriate definition of being an advisory commission. They are the one to whom this new employee is going to report. So,
No.
at a minimum, when we get to the resolution, I think it would be a very good thing to craft some amendments that will at least help clean up what is a not too well-drafted proposal.
So any other comments on 22-09? Megan, who was our first and second?
Bartz was a first and Lampy was a second.
Anybody else on this one? Mr. Lampy?
I'm sorry, just to address Alderman Smith's last comment, did we look at the ordinance with that combination, the reporting structure?
That's not correct, no. The person solely reports to the Park and Rec Director.
not
Any
what the
other comments?
resolution says.
Any other comments or questions on this one? All right, Megan?
Bartz?
Aye.
Blanky?
No.
Smith?
No.
Schmid?
No.
Wetzel? Moldenhauer?
No.
Davis?
Yes.
Lampy?
Aye.
Motion fails 3-4.
4-4.
4-4, sorry.
Correct? Is it, I kept my notes.
Here.
Is it 4-4? That's what I had. All right, and I'll break the tie and I will vote in favor. Okay, let's go to our next one. Our next is ordinance 23-10. This is to amend Chapter 550 of the official zoning map for the city of Watertown. This is here for me and the Plan Commission on the first reading. This pertains to the rezoning of 713 Milford Street.
For adoption.
Motion by Mr. Blanky, second by Mr. Lampy. We do have our zoning administrator here this evening if anyone has questions on these next three. Any questions or comments?
Just
Mr. Schmidt?
housekeeping?
There is a rezone request that's been considered at the Plan Commission. In order to proceed, we'd have to change the official map. Correct? Okay. Anybody else on this one? Megan?
Blanky,
Aye.
Smith, Schmid, Wetzel, Moldenhauer, Davis, Lampy, Bartz. Motion passed 8-0.
All right, let's go to our next. This is ordinance 23-11. This is to adopt amendments to the 2019 City of Watertown Comp Plan. This is here for me and the Plan Commission on the first reading. This pertains to 407 South Washington Street.
I would so move.
Motion by Mr. Lampy, second by Mr. Bartz. Discussion, comments? Megan?
Lampy, Bartz, Blanky, Smith, Schmid, Wetzel,
Aye.
Moldenhauer,
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Motion passed 8-0.
Next is ordinance 23-12. That's to amend Chapter 550, again, of our official zoning map for the city. This is here for me and the Plan Commission on the first reading. This pertains also to 407 South Washington Street.
I'll move again.
Motion by Mr. Lampy, second by Mr. Bartz. Questions, comments? Megan?
Lampy,
Aye.
Bartz,
Aye.
Blanky, Smith, Schmid, Wetzel, Moldenhauer, Davis.
Aye.
Motion passed 8-0.
Next is ordinance 23-13. This is to amend section 500-7C, temporary restricted parking in the city code. This is here for Mr. Smith, Public Safety and Welfare, on its first reading.
I would move for the adoption of ordinance 23-13 on its first reading.
Motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Schmid. Comments or questions on this one?
I'm just going to briefly say, this is probably going to be widely welcomed to people who basically have, cars boxed in some areas, if it's used this way.
Thank you. Anybody else? Megan?
Smith,
Aye.
Schmid, Wetzel,
Aye.
Moldenhauer, Davis, Lampy, Bartz, Blanky. Motion passed 8-0.
All right, let's go to resolutions. The first is Exhibit 9504. This is a resolution to enter into an agreement for the 2023 Tours and Promotion Services between Watertown Tourism, the City of Watertown, and the Watertown Area Chamber of Commerce. This came from me and the Finance Committee.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Wetzel, seconded by Mr. Lampy. Questions or comments on this one?
Normally
Mr.
it's an
Schmidt.
annual thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You got it. Megan?
Wetzel,
Aye.
Moldenhauer,
Aye.
Davis. Lampy. Bartz.
Aye.
Blanky. Smith. Schmid. Motion passed 8-0.
All right, next is Exhibit 9505. This is a resolution to enter into a property management agreement between the city and the City of Watertown Redevelopment Authority. This is here for me and the Finance Committee.
I would so move.
Motion by Mr. Lampy, second by Ms. Davis. Comments or questions? Mr. Smith?
Yes, I would normally defer from making a postponement motion now because I don't want to waste the council's time. But keeping in mind that these are resolutions and we would gain nothing or lose nothing by postponing these resolutions because the ordinance has to come back for the second reading anyway. And it would give an opportunity, and I'm just speaking for myself, to do the kind of investigation and groundwork that will be able to help us understand the extraordinary financial implications of this agreement, this management agreement. And so I would make a motion, and I will make it again for Exhibit 9506, should this pass, to postpone the consideration of this resolution until our next council meeting, when we'll take up the second reading of the previously passed first reading of the ordinance.
So a motion to postpone to the next meeting?
It's the same motion, but that's a little bit about the why.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Second by Mr. Moldenhauer. Anyone have additional discussion on that? All right. Megan? Oh, I'm sorry. Who was it? Mr. Wetzel?
Lampy.
Mr. Lampy?
Oh, sorry, you were pointing my way.
Yeah.
So I guess my objection to postponing is the same as it was for the previous one. There has been some information out there. I know in the packet that was provided today, we have essentially a budget on page 126 that talks about some immediate expenditures of the funds that are moving over. And I don't know how much ambiguity there is in terms of the financials of what's coming over to us. For example, the full-time position has already been allocated. We're already hiring a person for it. That was discussed all the way back when we were doing the 2023 budget. And the new parts, if there are new parts that are coming forward here, are essentially those items that are made visible, again, in the packet of the budget that's being passed over with regard to the events expenses, some capital outlay, and a few other pieces here. So I don't necessarily regard this as a high-risk transaction. I think most of what we are going to learn is known. I don't know that we're going to necessarily gain any additional insight with a 2-week delay.
Anybody else on the motion to postpone?
Yes.
Mr. Blanky?
I don't see any reason not to delay this for the simple fact of it will not go into effect until the ordinance that it's attached to passes as well. Therefore, by delaying it until the next meeting, it will be published at the same time as that ordinance and effectively take effect at the same time. There's no time lost, and it does give us the time for further discussion on the ordinance. I think it's inappropriate to pass funding for something before you pass something. It doesn't seem to be. You're putting the cart before the horse, to use a trope.
Stephen, I just want to ask you a procedural question. The ordinance that's being referred to, does that have a correlation to this agreement or to the money?
It would be possible for the ordinance to fail and for the resolutions to pass. They wouldn't have to go forward both in order for either one of them to be valid going forward.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on the motion to postpone? Mr. Lampy?
I'm sorry if I'm belaboring this point. So the assertion was these resolutions wouldn't be valid until we pass the ordinance. That's not true?
That is, what you just said is correct. The idea that these would not be valid or take effect until after the ordinance is passed is incorrect.
May I clarify my
Mr.
statement?
Blanky, hold on one second. I saw Mr. Bartz go up first. Mr. Bartz?
Yeah. Again, I'm just a little bit confused here too, because I think, as I read this resolution, it looks like the money is already there in an RDA account. It's not like we're trying to generate some new funds. It's already there. We're moving it from one account to another account. Is that correct?
That's what would happen in our next resolution.
We're not generating funds from any place. It's already
Correct.
exists. Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Blanky?
My point is that these two resolutions, if we pass them without passing the ordinance, are somewhat pointless. If the resolution comes back next week and one of the council members changes their mind, then these become a moot point, because the ordinance that effectively puts in the mechanism for distributing this wouldn't happen.
Ms. Davis?
I was going to ask the attorney, is what he said correct?
No, the ordinance that's in question being referred to that was discussed earlier tonight, that ordinance solely creates a commission that will be advisory to the creation of the new town square and the spending of those funds. Now, it is possible that violating that, not creating that ordinance would create a violation of this agreement for the city, and so I wouldn't necessarily strongly suggest that you ignore that obligation from this agreement. However, there are provisions within this arrangement that would allow the city to move forward even without that ordinance passing.
Any other comments? We're still on the motion to postpone.
To postpone.
Anybody else?
Question.
Mr. Wetzel?
Excuse me, I'm in allergy season, so my voice is rough. So just, the ordinance passing or not has no correlation to these resolutions, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if the ordinance fails, these still go through if we vote for them?
It will require the city take a different approach to meet some of the terms of this agreement, but it wouldn't prohibit the city from complying with this agreement or with moving forward.
I will refer to it as the resolutions, but we're voting on one first. If we do not pass these resolutions tonight, or we vote to postpone them for 2 weeks, what does that do to the city, or what could that do, or what?
The comment that I made earlier that we need to commit contractually to entertainment is probably the most pressing matter. Ms. Davis?
Am I correct in my understanding that this resolution does two things? It transfers the parcel, and it makes a one-time transfer of $350,000. Those are the two items?
Those are the two things that it obligates the RDA to do. There are other obligations that the city takes on under this agreement.
And so for the city's obligation, I'm only seeing one brief mention to that independent committee that could be easily, it says the full-time staff person shall report to the Park and Rec director as well as to an independent committee. So that's the only thing that I'm seeing in this resolution that refers to the ordinance. And that's easily adjusted, should it need to be.
Correct. We could use that to, an independent committee could be defined as a few different things.
Right.
Mr. Lampe?
I guess as long as we're going down the agreement, I mean, there's section 3.7 that regards the severability of provisions too. So if we're worried about enforceability of the agreement, I believe that that's a standard clause that if there was some problem with that independent commission, the rest would survive.
So I just want to level us up one more time. So we're just at the motion to postpone. So does anyone have questions about postponing or comments about postponing? Okay. So let's take the roll. We have a motion and a second on for us to vote on postponing this to the next council meeting. So Megan, will you please take the roll?
Smith?
Aye.
Wetzel?
Oop, you skipped Schmidt.
Oh, sorry, Schmidt? Wetzel? Moldenhauer?
Aye.
Davis?
No.
Lampy?
No.
Bartz?
No.
Blanky?
4-4. Okay, and I will break the tie and I will vote no. So we are now back to the original resolution. So this is Exhibit 9505. Additional discussion can continue here about any additional components of this agreement. Mr. Smith, I heard earlier, did bring up the Section 2.1.
Yes, I'm simply raising that as an issue where if you wanted good leadership organization, you would make it clear to whom this employee reports, not leave it ambiguous or refer to a nebulously named committee. I mean, obviously, it's referring to the citizen committee that is part of the ordinance. To so suggest that it's some other independent committee is not very much likely to, I mean, that's what we'd need is another third committee to oversee that individual. So it would be good to strike it out of there, but I think it would be even better to defeat the whole resolution, and I will try to identify the reasons why I think that this is a unwise undertaking. a lot of the recitals on the resolution pages actually are replicated in the management agreement, which follows. And the big issue, from my point of view, is what is envisioned as an extraordinary cost for this town square. The vision of the activation of the financial matters that are going to continue year after year after year is that we are going to, we being the city of Watertown, are going to receive under this agreement $350,000 from the RDA. That's one of the things that I wanted to spend some time trying to research, because it says that the RDA has raised $350,000. The implication is almost like they have some independent source of fundraising capacity, that they've been holding events, they have been saving money, they have been building up the fund that they're going to transfer to the city. The simple fact is the RDA does not have that kind of independent fundraising ability. They are a creation of the city of Watertown. The city of Watertown has provided them means of having substantial amounts of money transferred from the city to them, or in the instance of real estate, like the incubator building, transferred to them for the proceeds that would be coming. You know, I don't have all of the specific numbers, but there have been numerous instances where the city of Watertown has transferred money to the RDA, and they were our agent in acquiring the properties. That's how they are in title to this town square right now, because they were actively involved in the negotiation of the acquisition of those properties and used money that the city transferred to the RDA for the purposes of acquiring them. But to suggest that there is any meaningful difference between the RDA of the city of Watertown and the city of Watertown in terms of financial capacity is a mirage. It just is not so. The $350,000, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to ask for the RDA to provide for me their most recent audit, that I could see exactly what the paper trail was for the $350,000 now in their possession, which they're going to transfer to us and use the leverage of that money to bring about things that are included in the management agreement that I think are either unwise or a usurpation of the authority of the city council. So, that question, because we are pushing ahead and determined to have a vote on this resolution tonight, is a question I can't answer. And I suspect nobody else here can tell me with a surety where they think this $350,000 came from. Okay, that is a major concern. Now, I don't want to muddy the waters, and I'm not going to make a postponement resolution for the next resolution anyway, but there is a framework for anticipating annual costs for the work that's going to be undertaken as a management agent for one of our parks. And it was $101,000. Now, that's what the anticipated cost is. It would be totally speculative to try to suggest what the offset will be, what will the revenues be that are coming in. I understand that completely. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, this is a potentially expensive undertaking. And anybody that thinks this is not taxpayer dollar from day one, is totally wrong. Now, what concerns me also is not just the fact that this is an agreement with significant cost potential associated with it, but that it has no meaningful capacity. Once we vote this resolution through, let me just ask you to contemplate the question: how do you think the city gets out of this agreement if it goes south? We don't. This does not have a termination agreement unless both sides agree to rescinding, amending, or in any other way changing the agreement. What you pass tonight is going to be with us forever unless the RDA is willing to run up the white flag as well. And I don't think we can count on unelected individuals necessarily having the heartbeat for the taxpayers that we as council members have to have. So if we want out the way this is written, we have to be extremely deferential to the RDA, or we cannot do it. It is not going to be the result of our independent determination that it is in the taxpayers' best interest to modify or rescind this agreement. That is a serious defect. I don't know how many agreements I have voted on over the course of many years, the overwhelming number of which give a minimum period of time during which the other party has to be notified of what is the desire of the disappointed party, and that with that proper notice, they are able to leave the agreement. We can't leave this agreement unilaterally. And if you would like, I'll read it to you. Under 3.6 on page 3, under amendments, this agreement may be rescinded, modified, or amended. In other words, it could be terminated or it could be substantially changed in whole or in part by mutual agreement of the parties hereto. That means, as a city council, we are surrendering our unilateral choice to act in the best interest of our taxpayers. Now, if you're comfortable with that, I'm not. And at an absolute minimum, this needs to be amended. And that's why I asked for a little time to try to get some amendments together, to try to look at this and to protect the interests of the taxpayers who are looking at annual costs right now anticipated at $101,000. Now, that's not netted off. I completely want to be fair in what I'm saying. But I'm also telling you that the dollars that are supposedly this free money drifting on over from somebody else, it was all city money from the start.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm going to go to our finance director because he has, I'm sure you have the listing of where these donations came from.
I do not have the actual names on the spreadsheet that I have available to me, but do want to bring everyone up to date. There is an audit underway with RDA. It's not a completed document, so I don't have anything through December 31, 22 to relay to you. But I did work earlier today with Mason Becker, our RDA director, to go through what do we have in our coffers right now. We've actually got three different money market accounts, a checking account, and the Watertown Community Foundation account. The total of the assets on hand as of this morning was $1,251,276. The donations that have come through for this park were outside sponsorships. They're not City of Watertown dollars that are in the coffers of the Watertown Community Foundation. The reason why the foundation was tapped is for this very reason of being able to collect outside donations and sponsorships that the RDA could not do, but the foundation could do. Further, we went through the estimated remaining expenses for the park itself, as well as the $350,000 transfer. And after all of those bills will be paid, obviously, construction contract is still underway, retainage fees and the like have not yet been paid, but their projected net balance after the expenses of about $800,000 will leave them a cash balance of approximately $450,000.
I oversaw the person that was responsible for the future fund. That's what this money is called. And I know that it came from a local foundation. And then I can think of at least 3 businesses that donated to the future fund as well. It occurred during the fundraising for the square. Any other comments or questions on the agreement? Mr. Lampy?
I'm sorry, I have quite a few of things to say, and some of them are, partial agreement, and some of them are probably to refute some of the comments made by Alderperson Smith. I guess the first one on a technical matter around some of the duplication regarding the second resolution that's coming toward. I can speak to that from the finance, and essentially that was decided at finance that we ought to have a separate resolution to establish a segregated fund, as opposed to lumping that all in a single resolution. So that was a change, I believe, that came out of our last finance meeting when we were considering the package together. In terms of the intent of the RDA, I think that I do agree a lot with what Alderperson Smith has said in terms of intent. I very much would like to clean up what the RDA does and basically make sure that they are completely focused on their mission of redevelopment. And to that respect, again, moving these functions out of the RDA into a new commission, into a new person, I believe has that effect of essentially cleaning up the RDA's mission and getting us more toward a mission that I think we previously agreed on during earlier discussion that should eventually be moved into permanent city function. So I see this package of ordinance and resolutions as being an important step, kind of with the same facts, maybe with the same piece, but I see this as an important move forward. In terms of the RDA's previous ability to raise funds, again, I go back to the mission that, I think, John David sent a bunch of us on in like 2014, which was put together this town square, put together this new expanded library. So we had 2 essentially quasi independent agencies. Of course, I was in charge of the library, working with Alderman Smith, working with, then Alderperson McFarland and a few other people, basically putting that entire package together. We, like the RDA at the library, went out and got some professional advice as to how to do fundraising, raised a capital campaign, used exactly the same technique in using the Watertown Community Foundation as an organization that could collect on behalf of this project, people who wanted to donate to a 501c3 and have that fully tax deductible. So the techniques that were essentially used by both organizations and the authority used by both organizations to raise significant amount of private funds to offset many taxpayer dollars to build these fantastic structures was very similar, very deliberate. I think that was very much in the mission of what the RDA had at the time, which was to put something substantial in that location and leverage the full resources of the community, private funds are included. In terms of the usurpation of the, and forgive me on my pronunciation here, that's not a word I generally throw around at council, but basically us giving up our authority. This is basically us saying that the best way for us to understand what's going to go forward on the governance of this is to put this committee together. And so, I mean, this is an explicit statement about how we want to go forward with it. And as such, again, I don't see it necessarily seeing us giving up control. I think one area that you're probably going to find, again, I may have hinted this in the early discussion, that I perhaps do find some common ground on this is on the sunsetting of what this arrangement is. And as I look at this particular agreement and Section 3.6, as you pointed out, which regards, I believe this is an indefinite clause that requires mutual agreement. Again, to get this thing off the ground, out of the gate, I do not see any sort of short-term severance of that available. What I would be open to essentially is, again, after a prescribed period, say 3 years, moving into a situation where you could essentially have severability by a party given notice. As Alderperson Smith has mentioned, that is a fairly standard clause in a lot of contractual language. But again, to get it off the ground, I think that mutual agreement by both parties is essential.
Mr. Blanky?
Passing it before having language in it with severability makes it highly unlikely that that language will ever be in.
Mr. Schmidt?
I just have a question in regards to the structure from the committee it came out of. I see this resolution currently as 3 separate ones, and that's just as I read it, because I see it as section 1.1 as the RDA, who currently has ownership of the specific partial or partials we're discussing here, as a standalone item. And then the funding is a separate item. I don't see those as mutually connected. I see those as 2 independent operational requirements from a contractual standpoint in my head. The third one I see as a standalone item is it spells in here that we're going to hire somebody, but it doesn't include where that money comes from or the greater step that they're going to start at or any of that stuff. So that's an unfunded position that they're requesting as part of this agreement. So, but it says there in section 2.1. We'll hire somebody as part of this.
They're hired and they were budgeted for this year, so they exist at a grade K, step 2?
Okay, well, that part then is not clear because it says that we will hire, not that we have hired.
Well,
I mean, that's as it reads here in the current rep.
that happened on Monday?
Right.
Yeah, it had been posted since the beginning of the year. We just did it on Monday.
That would be my concern, but if the issue is the transfer of ownership, that should be a separate standalone item, and it shouldn't be all lumped together, because that's, I think, what's making this the biggest issue, is you're combining what appears to be 3 separate items into one. And so that's where I have concern, the non-separability in an indefinite. The concept of government going, well, we have to do something, leads to more problems than good. I mean, I understand the significance of having this and getting it done so we can get things going and use this big, nice, fancy space that we have. But the subtle nuances that could be changed to make it more clear and to resolve a lot of the concerns and issues that are being brought up, I think would be in the best interest of everybody and get more buy-in both from the council and the community as a whole.
Mr. Smith?
I appreciate those comments. For instance, it's not just the tense of a verb that makes this confusing. When I read this, I underlined, I think, in 4 different places that the city will hire, and I'm just scratching my head because we just hired such an individual, and yet this is all prospective. And the point is, if it has a completed act, why is it in here in the first instance? Why are we even talking about hiring a new employee when it has been completed and all the criteria for employee status and such has been determined? But just to throw out one thing that I consider to be somewhat ironic, okay? We have a minimum $350,000 fund that is going to undertake some very commendable, laudable activities. But what we have done is we have basically thrown away our capacity to independently, unilaterally, as a council on behalf of the taxpayers, act in the future as we see best. We are locked in based upon what a second party may or may not agree to. And I certainly would not wait 1, 2, 3 years to try to modify something that is a serious defect. However, in terms of the council's prerogative, as it relates to the history exhibit, our rights are all completely protected. We specify that if the city council doesn't agree with whatever's being portrayed in the history exhibit, why, the city retains its rights to veto and to prohibit aspects of that display. Why in the world are we worried about what our rights are in relationship to a history exhibit when we have given away independent future action in the best interest of the taxpayer and are counting exclusively on the deference of another party? That is wrong. And this could be cleaned up. I'm just trying to point out one thing after another, which I would have come back with amendments in 2 weeks if we'd have been gracious enough to allow that opportunity. But, and it's not the only things. Those are some significant things.
Mr. Lampe?
To address Alderperson Blanky's concern and Alderperson Smith, I mean, I would like to move for an amendment to modify Section 3.6 with appropriate language to allow for severability by either party after an initial mutual agreement period of 3 years.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend Section 3.6 to modify, to say that this agreement, we need to rephrase that sentence. I don't want to say may be severed, that doesn't sound quite right.
The start date?
The start date, I presume, is the date we sign. Do you have a suggestion for Mr. Lampe?
If I may make a suggestion, it would be to not amend section 3.6, it would be to create section 3.12, and such section would state that either party may terminate this agreement without cause or penalty by giving the other party 60 days advance written notice of its intent to terminate this agreement after April 30th, 2026.
Can you?
I'd be fine with that change.
Okay, so I'm hearing your motion to amend. I'm going to ask for a second in a moment, but I'm going to ask you to type, thank you, open a Word document, type that on the screen so people can see what you're saying. So I'm going to let you type it on the screen and blow it up so everyone can see it. Before I ask for a second, so then everyone knows what they would be seconding. And that you confirm what you're firsting.
Yeah, that looks good.
Was that the complete?
I believe so. I'm just double
Okay,
checking.
so I'm going to read it here. So we have a motion by Mr. Lampe to add section 3.12, which reads, either party may terminate this agreement without cause or penalty by giving the other party 60 days advance written notice of its intent to terminate this agreement on or after April 30th, 2026. Is there a second to Mr. Lampe's motion? Seconded by Mr. Wetzel. Let's have discussion on that amendment. Mr. Schwinn?
Just clarification. So this has not gone to the RDA for their piece until after we approve it and send it to them, correct? Or has it already came from them?
It already went to the RDA?
The RD's already approved this agreement.
So by us changing it, do they then have to go back and approve it on their end, or they're just gonna take it what we tell them?
There'll need to be a motion from them to approve it, and then they'll need to vote on that.
So this could still essentially be a while if we go back and forth. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the process if we move forward with it with the amendment, potentially.
The RDA would notice a meeting?
The RDA would need to notice a meeting that puts them out at least 24 hours. Theoretically, a special meeting could be called for it, so the earliest I would suspect they would be able to put this together would be on Thursday or Friday. Otherwise, early next week would also be presumable.
Okay.
Excuse me, other questions on the amendment only? In a moment, I'm going to take, so you're going to be voting on just the amendment. So I'm going to take a roll call vote on only the amendment. You're not approving the overall agreement, you're just approving, amending it to read with this section on your screen added to it. Everyone clear on what we're voting on?
Mayor, if I may
Yeah.
add just the title to the provision real quick to make sure it is in line with the rest of the agreement.
Are we all solid with the heading of termination?
It's fine.
Mr. Wetzel, are you comfortable with the heading? You were the second. Mr. Smith?
I'm just going to ask our city attorney if you think it would be well for us to begin that new section and refer to notwithstanding anything in section 3.6 and then specifying this, because they seem to be a bit in conflict to me.
That could be done, or the word rescind could be struck from section 3.6.
That would be the cleaner way, is just simply to make this the substitute for 3.06. And because I believe that there is a conflict in these two provisions. And to make this a superseding provision, we could add the language I suggested. We could substitute it in lieu of 3.06.
So have
3.6.
have what's on the screen replace what's currently in 3.6?
Yes.
What's your opinion on that?
I wouldn't recommend doing that in part because it removes the amendment clause in its entirety to simply replace 3.12 with 3.6. Notifying that it does require the written signed agreement by both parties to amend something does assist in preventing people from making oral agreements. It doesn't work all the times, but it does help reassure the fact to the court that we intended that any modifications would be brought before the council and the RDA, and both parties would consent to that amendment. So I would suggest leaving it in there. There does also become a dispute as to what then happens for termination of the agreement from year zero, or now until 2026, if we remove rescind from 3.6. My suspicion is that if a court was to review these two provisions, both within an agreement, that the court would determine that the section 3.112 is more specific as to the method of termination, and therefore that clause would be given effect after April 30th of 2026. And the termination language as far as rescinding the agreement in section 3.6 would only apply from year now until 2026.
I think that's reasonable. I'm just thinking the way that we can ensure how a court would interpret this is to simply say, notwithstanding anything to the contrary, that this provision will take precedent.
So are you seeking to have that added to 3.12?
I think it right at the front of 3.12, because I think
Notwithstanding.
the city attorney's points about keeping 3.6 has merit. I just want to get rid of the conflict, and I
Sure.
think this would do it.
So there's an update on the screen. I'm going to ask Mr. Lampe if he's, as the person who made the motion, are you comfortable with that addition?
I'm also fine with that, too.
Mr. Wetzel? Mr. Smith, how does that look to you?
That looks fine.
Any other comments on the text on the screen? Because that's what we're going to be voting on. We'll be voting just on the addition of this to what's in front of you. Megan?
Lampe,
Aye.
Bartz,
Aye.
Blanky,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Schmidt. Wetzel. Moldenhauer. Davis. Motion passed 8-0.
Okay, so now we are at an amended version of the agreement, and that amended version, we're going to keep on the screen, is what's showing on your screen. Ms. Davis?
So I'd like to make a motion to adjust the wording for section 2.1 to clear up the issue having to
Sure.
do with the will hire, and then also who directly oversees the full-time person. I would agree that there's some confusion there, and it'd probably be more clear for this full-time staff person to report directly to the Park and Rec Director, period. So I'll take the attorney's input on the best way to revise that, though, to accomplish those two things.
I would ask to clarify.
So we can get this on the floor.
Let's get some, I was gonna say, let's get some text up on the screen first, so that y'all know what you're seconding.
I'm a
Just to
friendly second.
clarify.
Oh, go ahead.
I know that an offer has been made, I believe it's been accepted. Has the individual started as of today's date?
May 1st.
May 1st, okay. So with the individual not starting until May 1st, the correct terminology of the agreement would still be that the city will hire a full-time staff person. From there, my recommendation would be if you would like us to clarify the reporting of an independent party.
Could you just strike the last sentence?
To put the whole last sentence, or to end it after Park and Rec Director?
Say, if they're going to be, the city will hire a full-time staff person to be placed within the Park and Rec and Forestry Department. Well, that would then presume that they will report to the Park and Rec Director. So could we just leave off that last sentence entirely, where it says who they report to?
You can certainly make that motion.
I'll make that motion to remove that last sentence unless the attorney sees a better way to do it.
Mr. Lempe, are you still seconding that?
That so we can go through it.
Okay. Stephen, do you see a reason not to have that sentence there? The job description does list the reporting relationship to the
Yep.
Park and Rec Director.
There's sufficient information within there to proceed with that.
Mr. Schmidt?
I just have a question in regards to their position. Is this position as a city employee able to then seek sponsorships in the scope of their position within the Park and Rec and not violate any solicitation rules? That I'm not really familiar with Wisconsin rules in
We
regards to
have,
solicitation.
our
for
ordinances
employees.
permit. Go ahead.
The city ordinances and ethics code does permit the city staff to request donations to the city as long as there are certain conditions met. We've also reestablished the ethics committee, who would also be able to provide any opinions or determinations as to whether any gifts or donations to the Parks Department was inappropriate.
Okay, that would be my concern, is to make sure that we, as a city, are protected, so that somebody operating on our behalf as an agent isn't using the full weight of authority that the council or the mayor has to solicit donations on the guise of, you do this for me, and I'll make sure we do something for you. That's my concern, having done contracting work for many years at the federal level, is they're very hypercritical of sponsorship and solicitation. So as a result, I'm very cautious of anybody as an agent of the city doing so unless there's clear, concise guidance of what the scope actually says they can do definitively. I'm not a fan of gray area with that regard specifically.
It's in the code.
Correct.
Okay, so there would be punitive measures against the employee if they so violated that. Okay, that helps
Yes.
a lot.
Good question. Okay. We're at this amendment. I just want to make sure I keep reminding us of that. Yes.
And I also share Alderman Schmidt's concern. I think that there's a clause in there regarding, that basically limits them to seek sponsorships for programming and operations events, which is meant by such events. And I think that that does keep a nice, tight, narrow scope in terms of what they should be soliciting. So they shouldn't, as I would see it here, necessarily be soliciting for things outside the park and whatnot. This is very specific.
Right. I just wanted to make sure there's no
I understand.
apparent kickback or anything like that from a standpoint from the city, so.
Mr. Blank?
Just one thing on the will hire, can we change that to will employ? Because employ implies you will either hire them or
Yeah.
they've already been hired.
I'm willing to change my motion to make that will employ if it's okay with the attorney.
We can. The reason I had originally listed it as we will hire is that it creates a less burden on the city versus to employ, gives a permanent ongoing obligation.
I thought that's what it was.
Okay. Thank
So
you for
I'll
clarification.
change
Thank
it
you.
however you
Well,
guys would like.
That's,
I would like the less burdensome one. You probably do too.
Okay. Okay. So as we stand right now, take a look at the red line on the screen. I'm going to take a vote on the red line on the screen. All right. Megan?
Davis.
Aye.
Hamby. Bartz. Blanky.
aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Schmid. Wetzel.
Aye.
Moldenhauer. Motion passed 8-0.
All right, so we are now at an amended version of this agreement. It includes the two modifications that are on your screen. Additional discussion, comments, questions? Mr. Smith?
I understand the intent of the new employee language or the new person language. What can we do to make it clear that the 2023 budget hire is that position, even though apparently there's a problem with the date that they haven't actually started yet? Is that
That's correct.
the point? Well, I think it just needs to be clear that what is in this agreement, especially if the hiring is complete before the effective date of this, and I suspect it probably is going to pass tonight, but then if we have to wait for it to be a final document, I suppose it could go past. I just want to make sure that there isn't any misunderstanding that there is a requirement being placed upon us, i.e. city's obligation to hire over and above what is already envisioned and present in the budget.
Do you see that concern?
I would dispute that it's an obligation to hire over and above what's already in the budget. The obligation is to hire on this full-time staff person to be placed within the Park and Rec Forestry Department, and that staff person's responsibilities are to coordinate programming and operations within the property, being the town square. So to document that, we would have the staff positions, employment, job description, we would have the statement and testimony of both HR departments, the finance director, myself, the mayor, multiple other witnesses as far as what the position was hired for, when it was hired for. I don't suspect we would have an issue there. If you guys want, we can definitely request confirmation from the RDA that this person does fulfill the obligations of that role. And we can just have the parties stipulate that, yes, this person's been hired for that portion. That wouldn't typically be included in the agreement. But I'm willing to do what we need to.
Is there any other question or concern around that topic? Or any other components of the agreement? Mr. Schwinn?
I just want to make sure, because this is a significant event for everybody. So the section 1-2 create a separate line item within the budget. Is that what that section does? Or is that a different thing entirely?
It doesn't create it. That's what our next item will be. This is saying that the money will move and it will be placed in a fund for that purpose.
So in theory, the fund, it goes into a fund that has yet, at this junction time, to exist. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly.
Correct.
So the next one, that would be a line item amendment to the budget of creating that specific account.
You got it.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding
You got it.
this.
Yep.
So then I would make an amendment then, or, yeah, it would be an amendment, right, to the current proposal to move the section 1.2 to the next resolution so that they're on the same thing, so that we're not approving funds to go into an account that doesn't technically exist yet. Because this, even if we pass this, still has to go to the RDA. I want to make sure that I'm understanding this process correctly.
So it has gone to the RDA in the form that was presented this evening.
Correct. But I meant with the changes that are currently been voted on and
Mhm.
applied, it has to go back to the RDA yet. Correct?
Yes,
Okay.
the RDA. I think that's what Stephen said earlier. Do you,
I can address that question. I would not recommend removing section 1.2. That is the section of the agreement that creates an obligation for the RDA to transfer funds to the city. If the next resolution doesn't pass, what would end up happening is those funds would be viewed as a restricted donation to the city, and they would be placed into another account within the city's funds that would still have those restrictions attached to them. The next resolution is in regards to creating a funding and budget for the receipt of those funds so that we can properly place those funds within the city's budget. That resolution just has to be passed before we receive the funds and before we start to spend those funds.
Okay, so this just says, this is the committing the RDA to give us the funds, and then in the event that the next one isn't passed, it still goes into a restricted account with all the proper restrictions and compliant issues attached to it, correct?
Should they sign the agreement?
Pending the approval of all parties involved. I just want to make sure that it has a definitive paper trail in regards to a specific line item and what we can use it for, because transparent funding is, yeah. Okay.
Mr. Lampe?
I just wanted to comment again that this second resolution regarding the fund is something that we decided to do at the finance level, essentially to clean up, first of all, the agreement and make it clear that the city was taking some action here. In terms of transparency, Mark and I have had this discussion in other arenas as well. I actually do like this idea of having the separate fund because it's very clear where money is passing in and out, and so I think this actually increases the transparency that folks might be interested in.
That part I don't have an issue with, the transparency aspect. I just want to make sure that this isn't going to obligate us to increase taxes on a liability standpoint by adding an extra line item budget, because it says that we can, later into this agreement, says they can receive donations against this. But I'm assuming if we're taking donations specifically for this item, they're not tax deductible. Is that correct? Because we are not a 501c3? If it's directly to this specific
can't answer
function.
that.
So I know that will matter for some people by creating this.
I would have to get back to you on that to give a full legal explanation. My expectation is that it would still be a tax deductible because it's a donation to the city with a for a restricted purpose.
That would be my question, is it still that way?
We
Because it is,
I don't know.
yeah, that's why we
I
don't.
do know we receive donations in the park department, like there's a Randy Rissler donation, that's for trees. You know, we receive large donations into this department in other ways, so I know it's possible. Okay, Mr. Stevens.
Government does not have to, as an entity, apply for tax-exempt 501c3 status. By its very nature, it is a nonprofit organization.
Thank you. Okay, let's level back up. So we have an amended agreement with the two amendments on the screen right now. Does anyone have additional discussion or comments? I'm going to take a vote in just a minute. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page on what we're voting on. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so I'm going to ask the clerk to take the roll on this amended version of this resolution with the two adjustments on the screen. Megan?
Lampe? Bartz? Blanky?
No.
Smith?
No.
Schmid?
Can I pass and come back to me? Is that allowed?
Sure.
Is it allowed?
Okay. With his vote? Okay, Schmid?
No.
Wetzel?
Aye.
Moldenauer? Davis? Vote is 4-4.
I will vote in favor. Okay, that was good discussion. Let's go to Exhibit 9506. This is a resolution to create the Town Square Future Fund and to approve the 2023 budget. This is here for me and the Finance Committee. Motion by Mr. Lampe, second by Ms. Davis. Discussion. Really? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Just so I read it right, so this fund, if created, would exist solely for two basic functions: to take the money that was tentatively approved in the last one, pending RDO approval and the processing that regards, then realign it into this fund specifically for the sole purpose for nothing more than park maintenance and related expenses to the park of its physical nature itself.
And the programming of it.
And the program, to offset some of the programming costs coming in versus the offsetting ticket revenue and licensing and all the stuff that's associated with those events. Is that correct in my understanding? And nothing else?
Correct, it would just be used for this park.
And it would not create a taxable increase in any form of scope at all? It's a standalone account that if it runs dry, and everything just ceases, essentially.
The intent is for
Not
this
to run dry,
fund
but-
to,
Right.
right, replenish,
Yeah. But
for
as
the
it
park
sits-
to make revenue.
Okay, so it'd be refunded and resupplied from park revenue, specifically from special events, licensing, potentially rentals.
Yes.
However, that would be for this fund and nothing else.
And donations.
And donations, okay. But it wouldn't come from tax increases. Because that's me what I'm gonna get asked most of, is my tax
Yeah.
gonna go up because of this?
No. Do you agree?
The intent is to have this fund cover the cost of that park.
Yes.
Again, I would kind of point back to the resolution we just passed. Sections 2.5 and 2.6 are very explicit in terms of use of funds and replenishment.
Anybody else on 9506? Mr. Smith?
Just a quick question, is the example of how that future fund is going to look, these were the best estimates for moving forward in 2023. The only question I've got on that is every other reference to what the RDA was doing was transferring 350,000. You've got 375 anticipated revenue. Is that because you feel there are going to be other sources of revenues that make that different than all the references to the 350?
This is our best estimate, us being Christine and Mark, put these numbers together. When budget was approved, we approved 75% of the cost of programming personnel to be within the general fund and 25% to be part of this future fund. So that's where the salaries and related expenses for compensation come from. The 25,000 above the 350,000 was my assumption that there should be right away some sponsorships for events that are going to be occurring then for the rest of this year.
Just that was intentional and that it's different anticipated dollars.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I was reviewing the portions you pointed out, Alderman Lampy, in regards to that. If the position is, this is kind of an overlap issue, so if the position is fully funded by us as a city in this 23 budget that was passed and been posted since January, but it says in here under that section that Alderman Lampy pointed out is salary and other administrative costs for the full-time staff member who coordinates programming and operations. How does that work if that fund runs dry? If that fund specifically, one of its key requirements is to fund that person, that's, do you see where there's the confusion I'm having here with that? Because if the fund says it's supposed to fund the employee, but we're funding the employee, this doesn't give us the percentage breakdown related to it, and so we're creating a fund to pay somebody that may or may not exist to fund them. The rest of it makes sense in regards to the supplies and the maintenance and all that other stuff, so.
Yes.
So I think that the reference that we made to the budget process in 2023 or in November, leading up to the budget of 2023 was the key event in terms of the distribution of salary for the position that we ultimately decided to fund. If I can recall some of the discussion that was taking place at the time, the original proposal was essentially for a full-time position and a part-time position and a different allocation of dollars to those. But the final allocation that we arrived at was the 75% city-funded for essentially a shared parks programming position that also include the duties for the town square. And so the exact breakdown of that came from those budget discussions. And you know, along the lines of not having too many duplicates, I can see why that was not also added here. But basically, that was the agreement that we had made going into 2023, coming out of finance and then through council.
Other comments or questions on 9506? Right, Megan?
Lampy. Bartz. Blanky.
Aye.
Smith.
No.
Schmid.
Aye.
Wetzel.
Aye.
Moldenhauer. Davis. Motion passed 7-2.
All
7 to
right, very good.
Two.
6-2.
Next meeting, Megan's counting is going to be spot on.
I'm getting a different spreadsheet going.
All right, very good. Okay, let's go to our next one. This is Exhibit 9507. This is to review and approve a resolution pertaining to the River House Development Agreement Amendment. We do have Nick Patterson from T-Wall on our virtual meeting for awareness, in case there's any questions. Is there, I would,
Move for the adoption of Exhibit 9507.
motion by Mr. Smith,
Also move.
second by Mr. Moldenhauer. Questions, comments? Mr. Cheesebro?
I did want to point out that there was one modification since this came out of the Finance Committee. That modification is to Section 2 Sub B, undertakings of the developer. The original language that the city had gone back to the developer with was that it would state, and substantial progress has been made in framing or laying of the foundation. The developer has asked that we revise that to what's been provided here. In speaking with the engineering department, that does appear to be appropriate language that would also determine approximately when construction was initiated, which is what that provision is to define. So our recommendation is that it be adopted as is presented.
Thank you. Anybody else on this one? Mr. Smith?
I know I've been on the kind of the negative side of some of these past resolutions and discussions, but this is really a remarkable step forward, not just the amendments here, which are all very reasonable and undoubtedly are going to be key in moving forward with the project, but the whole notion of having this type of a development underway in Watertown with the potential of multiple phases was something that was hard won and certainly is a tremendous kudo to the mayor, the negotiating team, and T-Wall Enterprises for coming to this agreement. It is hugely in the city's interest, and I see nothing but reasonable changes in the amendments that are being proposed tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
The part that was changed with the highlight underneath
Yep.
it, I'm struggling with that word, and it's either enunciation or meaning.
Excavation and shoring?
That's what it is. Okay, my
Yeah.
brain was just
That's okay.
breaking. I wanted to make sure.
That's okay.
Yep, no, it's my district, so I want to make sure I'm understanding what it actually
Good.
says. So,
Good.
and it does say, that even though it's not, we struck out sustained, but it says progress, and it does put a hard deadline in the last sentence regards to 18 months. So there's still a hard deadline within there, if I read that correctly. Am I right?
Correct. They have to complete construction within 18 months of starting.
So if people ask, this is the fact. September 30th, 2023, that thing has to be started. 18 months later, it has to be done. Is that fair?
Correct.
That's the takeaway here.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. I just wanted to make sure I had a good grasp of the hard, fast deadline on there, so.
Very good.
Okay, I'm good.
Anybody else on this one? Megan?
Smith. Schmid.
Aye.
Wetzel. Moldenhauer.
Aye.
Davis. Lampy. Bartz. Blanky.
Aye.
Motion passed 8-0.
Very good. Nick, thanks for hanging out for a couple hours for that one. All right, next is comments and suggestions from citizens present. I see Nick. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say thank you for having me. I appreciate your guys' support. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, our next item is comments and suggestions from citizens present. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Wetzel, second by Mr. Blanky. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Before you skedaddle, stop by Megan and sign your oaths, please. Thank you, everybody.